Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Thursday, September the 24th, 2020. On this episode, with 40 voting days left until Election Day, Donald Trump makes it very clear he does not intend to leave if he loses.
There is a peaceful transferal of power after the election.
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and you'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control.
You heard it. He said it. Yesterday, during the quote-unquote press conference, which these are now, look, they have been for many, many months now, campaign rallies from the White House podium in the White House press briefing room. You heard Donald Trump say just then, we'll get rid of the ballots. That's what he said. Get rid of the ballots. I hope you know now that you have a dictator in the White House. I hope you know that. I have been saying this for so long. I'm not the only one. Far from the only one. Many of us have said out here from day one that this guy is a dictator. You hear some people saying, well, he's performing. This is not a performance. I have had I almost said Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is, by the way, lying in repose today in the United States Supreme Court, and also will be lying in state tomorrow. The first woman ever, by the way, to lie in state, I believe. Rosa Parks lay in, I'm not necessarily sure if it was lying in state, but she was given an honor that was not necessarily too far away from the one given to the late Supreme Court Justice. She will be lying in the rotunda of the Capitol building, lying in state there tomorrow, Friday. But I had Ruth Ben-Ghiat on this podcast a couple of months ago now, and she talked about the very things that you are hearing from Donald Trump, who has been talking like this, not just yesterday. This is not really the first time that he has said this. I mean, yes, this may be the first time he said get rid of the ballots, but just 5 weeks ago today, he said this.
In 78 days, we're going to stop the radical left. We're going to win the state of Wisconsin, and we are going to win 4 more years. And then after that, we'll go for another 4 years because, you know what, they spied on my campaign. We should get a redo of 4 years. We caught him spying on can you believe it? Did you see the FBI agent? The fake news and Trump. You know, they're going to go out of business when I do leave. In, let's say, 16, 20 years, something like that. So when we leave, they're all out of business.
That was in Wisconsin exactly 5 weeks ago today, where Donald Trump said that he wanted another 4 years. So he said that if he won this election, he didn't even say if, he said, we're going to win this election, and after that, we're going to have another 4 years because, you know, they spied on my campaign. Of course, that's another lie from Donald Trump. And then you heard what he said later on, and maybe, you know, after 16 years, 20 years, then I'll leave. I mean, and then he chuckles, but he's not joking. This is exactly what he means. Donald Trump lies like a rug, and he also has a habit. I mean, this guy is not joking. He chuckled, but he is not joking. Donald Trump lies like a rug, but he also has a habit of saying something that he means. And when he says that he wants 16 years or wants an additional 4 years after a second term, if he should win it, he is deadly serious. Michael Cohen told you about how serious he is.
I've acknowledged I have made my own mistakes, and I have owned up to them publicly and under oath. But silence and complicity in the face of the daily destruction of our basic norms and civility to one another will not be one of them. I did things and I acted improperly, at times at Mr. Trump's behest. I blindly followed his demands. My loyalty to Mr. Trump has cost me everything. My family's happiness, friendships, my law license, my company, my livelihood, my honor, my reputation, and soon my freedom. And I will not sit back, say nothing, and allow him to do the same to the country. Indeed, given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power. And this is why I agreed to appear before you today. In closing, I'd like to say directly to the president, we honor our veterans even in the rain. You tell the truth even when it doesn't aggrandize you. You respect the law and our incredible law enforcement agents. You don't villainize them. You don't disparage generals, Gold Star families, prisoners of war, and other heroes who had the courage to fight for this country. You don't attack the media and those who question what you don't like or what you don't want them to say. And you take responsibility for your own dirty deeds. You don't use your power of your bully pulpit to destroy the credibility of those who speak out against you. You don't separate families from one another or demonize those looking to America for a better life. You don't vilify people based on the God they pray to, and you don't cuddle up to our adversaries at the expense of our allies. And finally, you don't shut down the government before Christmas and New Year's just to simply appease your base. This behavior is churlish, it denigrates the office of the president, and it's simply un-American. And it's not you. So to those who support the president and his rhetoric, as I once did, I pray the country doesn't make the same mistakes that I have made or pay the heavy price that my family and I are paying.
That was Michael Cohen testifying in February of 2019 in front of the House. It was a committee run at the time by Representative Elijah Cummings. And I forget what the name of the committee was. I believe it was the Oversight Committee. And now, of course, sadly, since that testimony from last year, Representative Elijah Cummings passed away. And the reality is now is that people cannot deny anymore that Donald Trump is a dictator and that Donald Trump is a danger to the United States of America. There is no mistaking this now. And if there is anything quote unquote good about what he said last night about get rid of the ballots, it is that now people, I believe, have been awoken from their slumber. Those maybe 20 million people who thought that, well, he's only joking, he doesn't mean it, Even the people who support him know intrinsically now, they know in their hearts, in their souls, that this guy is rotten to the core. And they knew this before. But they can no longer say that this guy is joking. If they choose to continue to delude themselves, then that is their prerogative. We all have a prerogative. We can have a prerogative to be smart and vote early, or we can have a prerogative to go, ooh, let's see what happens with this. Because there is that small percentage of people in this country who do love the authoritarian. Again, Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who has a book coming up in November called Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present, has talked about this for a long time and talked about authoritarianism and the strongman and the fascist, and that's what Donald Trump is. And this is not Donald Trump modeling himself after that. This is Donald Trump doing it. The people who support him know this. The people who support him know it. And those 20 million people who are saying, oh, well, maybe it's a joke. Maybe it may not be as many as 20 million. It may be fewer. It may be even more. But there is a segment of people who say, oh, he's joking. No, he is not joking. As Michael Cohen has said in numerous places, this guy does not joke. He doesn't have a sense of humor. This is the same guy, Donald Trump, who told the governor of South Dakota, for heaven's sake, Kristi Noem, that he wanted his face on Mount Rushmore. If you remember just a month ago, and people have already forgotten this, there was a videotape from 2018 in which the governor of North Dakota, Kristi Noem, is telling a reporter or somebody, could be a reporter, that in that year or just before, maybe 2017 or so, Donald Trump had said to her directly that he wanted his face on Mount Rushmore. And she laughed. She said that she laughed at him and kept laughing and then looked at him and realized that he wasn't laughing at all. He was dead serious. That's what she said. And she said it 2 years ago. Now, I don't know why the tape only just was released last month. It's funny how that happens, isn't it? The media has these tapes and they just release them. It just becomes widely known just last month what the governor of North Dakota said, the governor of South Dakota said 2 years ago. It only just becomes nationally known now, 5 weeks ago. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother episode. But you hear the Republican governor telling you that from South Dakota, Kristi Noem, that this guy was dead serious. You hear Michael Cohen say it, that this guy does not have a sense of humor. He said it in his book, Disloyal, that came out just earlier this month. He said it, as you heard, in the testimony that he will not leave peacefully. He said it to Lester Holt, did Michael Cohen, in an interview just a couple of weeks ago. He has said this over and over and over again. But the get rid of the ballots line and there will not be a peaceful transfer of power. You have to go further. He added to that, there will not be a transition at all. It will be a continuation. And even people in the media, some people last night in the cable news media, even some of them did not make the logical next step. They did not listen with that third ear. If someone tells you, in this case, Donald Trump, who is a dictator, some people just can't reconcile that. Yes, dictators exist here in the United States, and the one that we have is Donald Trump. He's really the first dictator that we've had when you think about it. Some may be able to tell me that that's not true in terms of people in the White House, but he is. Donald Trump is a dictator. A tiny one, but a dictator nonetheless. And if he tells you that he wants to get rid of the ballots or will get rid of the ballots, and then he tells you that there won't be a peaceful transfer of power, and then he tells you that there will be a continuation, what he is telling you is that he will not leave the White House. And it's incredible, even Rachel Maddow, who is on top of this, and I think Chris Hayes as well is on top of this, neither of them, to the best of my memory last night, said he won't leave. That's the piece of information that you all need to be aware of. He is telling you. Listen with a third ear. He is telling you he won't leave. That's the important piece of the information. Yes, get rid of the ballots is something that will disturb you, and you should be disturbed and awakened by it. Yes, it won't be peaceful. Yes, you should be disturbed by that and be awakened by it. But the point of all of this that I don't think is being emphasized enough is that he won't leave. That is what he's saying. That's the whole point of it. He won't leave. Now listen to this, please. If you vote early and you vote for Joe Biden and you get everybody you know to do the same, this will be a landslide. The only way that we will be able to get Donald Trump out of office is to vote in a landslide for Joe Biden. I've said this many times, and I know I'm not the only one. This election must be a landslide for Joe Biden. I think it's time now for those people who voted for Donald Trump, if you have a conscience, to admit that you made a mistake, that you were wrong. You have to admit to yourself that you might well be a racist. You have to reconcile with that and reckon with what you're seeing now as people take to the streets peacefully in support of Breonna Taylor and her family and in pursuance of justice. You have to admit to yourself that you wanted change, but boy, you had no idea what you were signing up for. If you have a conscience, you will do that. It is now time for people, regardless of the political party that they wear on their sleeve or don't wear on their sleeve, it is now time for people, even those who are still, that small percentage who is still thinking, I'll vote for Kanye, or I'll vote for the Green Party, or I'll vote for the Libertarian. It's time for those individuals as well. It's time for the people who stayed home. It's time for the brand new, never before voted voter to now stand up and say, I am going to vote for Joe Biden, and this is going to be a landslide, and I'm going to tell everybody I know to vote for Joe Biden, because as I've said before, this goes far beyond political parties. This is about a threat to the national security of the country. Donald Trump has told you once again that he is a threat to you, and that he is a threat to the United States of America. He repeats the Russian talking points. The FBI has warned you of this. He is destroying the infrastructure of the country, which was laid out first of all, and the road to that destruction began with Reagan. And now, the very close to the end of it is happening with the guy in the White House right now. You really have to get to a point where you have to metaphorically sledgehammer people over the head with this. Because there are still, in my view, many, many people who are naive to this. This is no longer a drill, as someone said on cable news TV last night. This is no longer a drill. It is time for people to get serious. The mission now, the mission right now, is not just to make sure that Joe Biden wins. And is not just to make sure that Democrats are voted in across the board, in the Senate, in the House, in the state houses in this country, in the state legislatures of this country, and beyond. Mayorships, judges, whatever. The mission now is to make sure that Joe Biden wins this election in a landslide. That is the only result America will survive with.
Going to go on with that one officer. And then there are still active investigations going on with the FBI and also internally with the Louisville Metro Police Department. Allison?
Okay, Brent, thank you very much for all of that. Now to this jaw-dropping news. President Trump refuses to commit to a peaceful transition of power if he loses the election. CNN's Joe Johns is live for us at the White House. Joe?
Allison, you know, peaceful transfer of power is a hallmark of the American system. It's what sets us apart from authoritarian regimes, dictatorships, and the president's refusing to commit to it, even though he took an oath to uphold the Constitution, is surprising, but not necessarily shocking, simply because the president has repeatedly attacked the system and also made baseless claims of fraud in an election that's not going to conclude for weeks. With just 40 days to go until Election Day, President Trump refusing to commit to a peaceful transition of power should he lose re-election.
Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
When pressed again, he continued to make baseless claims of election fraud.
Get rid of the ballots and you'll have we'll have a very peaceful, there won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it. And you know who knows it better than anybody else? The Democrats know it better than anybody else.
Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden not surprised by the president's comments.
What country are we in? I'm being facetious. I said, what country are we in? Look, he says the most irrational things. I don't know what to say about it, but it does surprise me.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer firing back at Trump.
This man has no honesty, honor, values, or faith in the American system. He doesn't deserve to be president, and hopefully he will learn his lesson.
In a tweet, Republican Senator Mitt Romney calling out the president, writing, "The peaceful transfer of power is fundamental to democracy," and adding, "Any suggestion that a president might not respect this constitutional guarantee is both unthinkable and unacceptable." Back in 2016, then candidate Trump refused to say he would accept the results of the 2016 election.
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time.
And after losing the popular vote by nearly 3 million in that election, the president falsely blamed widespread voter fraud.
You have people that are registered who are dead, who are illegals, who are in 2 states. There are millions of votes, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to do an investigation.
Trump launched an election integrity commission to look into his claims. It found no evidence to back him up. I'm going to say this again. There's no evidence of widespread fraud in the 2020 election. The only fact-based concerns about mail-in voting relate to the slowdown at the United States Postal Service, the president's stated urgency to get a ninth justice on the court in the event the court has to decide an election case is highly likely to raise questions about the political impartiality of the person he wants to put on the court. John.
All right, Joe Johns at the White House. Thanks very much. I just want to make one thing clear. I do think this is shocking. This is next level stuff here when you're talking about the peaceful transfer of power. I've been in countries and seen people killed over the transfer of power. It is not something to joke about. And to be clear, the refusal to commit to the peaceful transfer of power is an implicit threat of violence, an implicit threat of unprecedented action from a president of the United States. And it happened on another front overnight in a way that impacts every American during this pandemic. The president threatened to overrule new safeguards being discussed by the FDA in the vaccine approval process.
It sounded to me, it sounded extremely political. Why would they do this when we come back with these great results? And I think you will have those great results. Why would we be delaying it? But we're going to look at it. We're going to take a look at it. And ultimately, the White House has to approve it.
Overruling the FDA on vaccine approval would be unprecedented. Experts tell us they have never heard of such a thing. CNN's Lucy Kavanaugh live in Denver. And Lucy, this is happening as new cases begin to rise again in the country.
That's right, John. Look, vaccines take time to develop, and they only work if there's public confidence and people feel that.
That was John Berman of CNN on the program New Day this morning, talking about his own experience, witnessing firsthand the consequences of a violent situation regarding the refusal to cede power. This is fascist dictatorship, and that is what Donald Trump is telling you. Welcome back. I want to apologize to those of you who are profoundly disturbed. I mean, I honestly do not know any other way than this to convey this information. And I know that some people are afraid, and we all are and should be afraid. And that should sink in. That should be felt. And it should then be acted upon with urgency. We have seen 52 people in the Senate be complete cowards, all of them Republicans. But the encouraging thing is that while one of the 53, the one person who did not join that 52 in acquitting Donald Trump 7 months ago, 7.5 months ago now, Mitt Romney, even though he has supported this call for this Supreme Court vote before the election, he came out last night, tweeted and said that this get rid of the ballots thing is completely unacceptable and is antithetical. So he has stood up. I'm not expecting Mitt Romney to be this savior. We've got too many people expecting politicians, specifically white male politicians, to be saviors. And quite frankly, the news media has done this as well. They've done this a lot, and a lot of people in this country have expected white male saviors and have hoped for them. They did for Robert Mueller, and even the media's coverage of John McCain giving the vote to put a dagger in McConnell's plan to get rid of Obamacare back in 2017 was covered as from an angle of white male saviorship, even though 2 white female senators had already given the assurance and had voted against McConnell, both of them from the Republican Party. That would be Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who is going to lose her re-election bid, and, at least in my opinion, she will lose, and Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Both of them also voted against Mitch McConnell, the Republican who is doing so many things that are violating the Constitution. Both of them voted against Obamacare being scrapped, and yet the media really didn't cover them in that way that they covered John McCain, who also cast a dagger against it. It was really both Murkowski and Collins who in 2017 were the ones who put the hammer blow down against Mitch McConnell, a member of their own party. They put country before party. Now, Susan Collins has not done that since, the senator. She has not done that since. Obviously, she voted for Kavanaugh. That certainly was not putting country before party. And, she acquitted Donald Trump. She voted to acquit him. That was not putting country before party. And she had the nerve to talk about, well, I think Donald Trump has learned his lesson. He'll learn it. No, he's not learned his lesson. I want to know, Senator Collins, if you are listening, and I know that you're not. But if you are listening, do you think that Donald get rid of the ballots Trump has learned his lesson? Barton Gellman has written an article in The Atlantic, and since I am apologizing for scaring the bejesus out of some of the people who may be listening here, the article that I'm about to tell you about, and I'm going to link to in this episode, in the notes of this episode, will scare you far more than anything I've said. It is from Barton Gellman. It's in The Atlantic. It was released yesterday. It is called The Election That Could Break America. I think it is well worth reading. It will frighten you. I will warn you of that in advance. But hopefully the function is to frighten you into action, which is all I'm trying to do, really, is to not frighten you because I want you to be frightened, but frighten you to do something. You know what people are doing all over this country right now, as they have been doing for the last, 5 months or so, 4 months or so. 4 months. Tomorrow will be exactly 4 months since the murder of George Floyd. 4 months tomorrow. And ever since May the 25th, people have been in the streets all over this country. Now, it's not getting covered that way. It's only getting covered when there's some kind of violent skirmish or when you've got these unnamed stormtroopers renditioning people. And by the way, if you think that that's going to stop if Donald Trump wins a second term, that will be ubiquitous across the country. You will have no constitution. This guy will move to eradicate the Constitution, not just amend the Constitution and get rid of amendments. He will eradicate the Constitution. That blooming thing won't exist under this guy. And if you think I'm exaggerating about that and I'm scaring you some more, just look at what he's done this year alone. The post office. How he disrespects the military that he is supposed to be commander-in-chief of. How he has done nothing to his enemy, but the guy he claims to get along with. But he's done nothing to America's enemy, Vladimir Putin, as he puts bounties on the heads of American military personnel. He is telling you in North Carolina to vote twice. And you don't think that he would get rid of the Constitution? You don't think that that could happen? Consider this from Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 11/9 from 2018.
The liberals were vanquished, and the public supported Adolf Hitler. taking complete control. This Jewish weekly in Germany published a front-page editorial saying that everyone should calm down. Now that the Nazis are in power, we don't believe that Herr Hitler and his friends will do all the things that they promised. They won't suddenly take away the constitutional rights of German Jews. They won't lock us up in race ghettos or unleash the murderous mobs on us. They can't do these things because the Constitution won't let them. Back in the U.S., the New York Times agreed. They reassured the American people that things would not be that bad. They even wrote flattering articles and said that Hitler's anti-Semitism was not so genuine or violent as it sounded, and he was merely using anti-Semitism as a bait to catch followers.
When you track how people first reacted to Hitler and Mussolini, they said, oh, he's just insane. Or the classic thing is that the elite party, in this case, the GOP, we're going to invite him into power. And then we're going to control him.
How am I doing? Am I doing okay? I'm president. Hey, I'm president.
We must stop looking at Donald Trump as a so-called president and call him exactly what he is, a dictator. Stop treating him like a president. He doesn't even treat himself like a president. He is a dictator. He is a destroyer. I've said this before here. History is instructive, and this wide-eyed, oh no, he wouldn't do that, because there are things in place to stop him. You have to study history, and I think one of the things that bedevils a lot of Americans is that there are obviously large exceptions and people are aware. I'm not saying that they're not, but what I am saying is that there are a great many people in the country who just do not have any knowledge of history. And I'm not even only talking about American history. I'm talking about history in general. I'm not talking you have to go back to the 1500s to know what the history is. And there is history, of course, from the 1500s. Look at the 1600s, my goodness. Black people brought here in chains from the African continent. 1619 Jamestown in Virginia. And this is the guy, Donald Trump, that wants to get rid of that history. He doesn't want that history being taught. He wants to get rid of the 1619 project that Nicole Hannah-Jones did with the New York Times. She won a Pulitzer Prize for that, by the way. He wants to get rid of all. You don't know what this is. And I say that not to you listening, but I'm saying it kind of more generally speaking, kind of rhetorically in a way. You don't know what this is. Some people just have no idea. It's not me trying to wag my finger. But there are people who have no idea or have no care, quite frankly, to have an idea about this. This happened in Nazi Germany. This is what started Nazi Germany. And I have people I know who are Jewish who are telling me, and I've said this to you before, dear listener, who are telling me now in 2020 that this, from their vantage point, is Nazi Germany in America. And as someone who is a Christian, I tend to agree with them. I agree with them. This isn't even about a question of faith. I only mention the people I know who are Jewish who are saying this is to give you an idea that if anybody on this planet in the last 100 years knows something about Nazi Germany, it is Jewish people. Yes, there are other groups as well who Hitler killed, genocided, but Jewish people know very well And when they say never again, I agree. Never, ever again. We cannot go down this road again. We cannot. The swastikas that I have seen at rallies, Bernie Sanders, who is Jewish, had a rally in Arizona. See, people have already forgotten this. Bernie Sanders had a rally this year in Arizona. I believe it might have been in Phoenix, back in January of this year, January 2020. Might have been near the end of January. And someone in the rafters of the arena, yes, this is pre-COVID. This is when we had no idea about coronavirus, or we had just gotten word that one person coming back into the country, as Donald Trump says, coming from China, had apparently contracted this virus. That was at the stage we were in at the time of this rally, an indoor rally that Bernie Sanders held during the presidential primary campaign. This is before the first primary, because if you remember, the first primary was February the 3rd of this year in Iowa. Remember that? With the whole thing with the app and Pete Buttigieg and the money that the $42,000 that his campaign donated to this app that helped, that was the app that was counting all. I mean, it was a whole mess. We all know, right? And nothing's been said about that since. You know, the Iowa Democratic Party chairman, he resigned. And, you know, it was kind of everybody just looked the other way and never talked about any of this again. But all of that is to say that the rally that Bernie Sanders did in January of this year in Arizona, in the upper deck of the arena, there was a white man. He was a white boy. He looked like he was all of 15, maybe he was 20 years old, if that. Unfurled a swastika. He unfurled a flag, a Nazi flag. And if you go on YouTube or if you do a search online, you may still be able to find that video. It was an Instagram video, actually. And you will see it. And in the top left corner of that video, a guy in a white t-shirt, a white guy, unfurls a swastika, a flag with a swastika on it. And there are people in the video pointing up, pointing, and then shouting, look over there. And Bernie you look at Bernie, he's kind of looking around. And by the way, that guy was taken out of the building, removed. This is not a joke, folks. This is not a drill. This is not a drill. And it really is time that people, with just over 5.5 weeks to go, start taking all of this very, very seriously. Once every 80 or so years, this kind of threat comes along. It may not be as pronounced as this, but every 80 or so years in the cycle of history, we have these kinds of markers, these kinds of threats, these kinds of alarm bells that ring. Roughly every 80, 85 or so years. And now we're having that moment now. Roughly 80, 85 years or so after Nazi Germany. This really must be taken seriously now. There are books that have warned of this. I had been, during the summer of 2019, on a regular basis reading from one of these books. And I don't know if I continue to do that now, particularly in this climate, in this very difficult, trying year. If I continue to read that book on a video and post it to Twitter, if I will really make people uncomfortable, because it is in your face now. I will tell you, I may post a photo of the book. I may post a photo of the book cover. It's called They Thought They Were Free. It's by Milton Mayer, and the subtitle is The Germans 1933 to 45. And on several occasions, I think I've even done it on this podcast, in episodes past, I've read portions of this particular book. And one of the portions, and I'll paraphrase it, is a section where I read out of the book, and it's a book about 15 to 20 German men who were living through the time of Nazi Germany. And they described what it was like to be living through those times and what they did or did not do in response to it. The so-called good German, right, who just stands back and doesn't do anything. And they really are not good Germans at all, of course. And they allow and do not stand up for and therefore approve of the execution and genocide of Jewish people. And so this book is a series of interviews with these 10 to 15 or so German men who had professions or who didn't, or in most cases had professions, who liked to have thought of themselves as decent people and how they didn't do this or they did do this. And then they talked about what they witnessed and how the country went from this highly industrialized, and Germany was back then. Germany was, at the time, had the greatest industry in the world at the time, and had great doctors, they had great infrastructures. And all of that withered away on the vine when Hitler came into power, and people that seemed to be these nice people in the neighborhoods that these 15 or 10 or so German men lived in became monstrous. They became monsters. Monsters, I say. Because of Hitler and Nazism and this genociding of Jewish human beings, this genociding of a whole group of people, and this castigating of gypsies, as they were called, and of people who were gay, of black people. I mean, this extended, this net. I mean, up to 12 million people were killed in Nazi Germany by Hitler and the Nazis. And at least 6 million of them were Jewish. And this book talks about how these men dealt with the so-called times. Not the New York Times, but the times that they were living in. And so I read from that book, and one of the things I read from the book is everything on the surface looked okay. You know, your movie theaters, well, now your movie theaters don't look okay because, of course, we're living through a pandemic. But in the time that this book was written, it was published in the 1950s. It chronicled, again, 13 years from the 1933 through 45, 13 years. And he's in one of these people says, and I read this, he said, well, you know, everything looks fine on the, I'm paraphrasing, everything on the surface looks fine. You know, you had this, you had that, you had the other, the churches, the schools, the houses, the restaurants, everything looked fine. But underneath, the underbelly of the people was rotting. And that was only amplified by the fact that everything that you walked around the streets and looked at seemed perfectly normal, so-called normal, perfectly ordinary, I should say. It looked very ordinary. The streets were quiet and the houses were intact. And the church and the baker and the movie theater and the coffee shop. It was all nice and neat. But that only belied the evil in people's hearts and the perilous situation that Germany was in. And that's going on right now, folks, here in the United States. Only there's a pandemic that makes you aware that you're not in the quote-unquote ordinary world or the ordinary situation. And many of you, have been in your homes for months and months. And some of you have lost your jobs. And some of you have been really feeling as if life is not worth continuing. And I say that because if people are feeling that way, I do want to, at this point, provide a phone number for you to seek some assistance and some help. These are very difficult times. And I do not forget, and I am mindful of, the reality that there are people who are suffering with deep depression. There are people who are suffering in silence, suffering alone, and who really are in a deep depressive situation that clinically is very, very, very serious. So I want to, at this point, provide a phone number for you or for those people that you know who do need help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. 1-800-273-8255. Because it is, I think, sometimes for some of us, easy to forget that there are people out here in a great deal of mental pain. And I really do endeavor to get someone on to talk about this because it is very important. And we don't talk about mental health. And we don't talk about it the way we should, honestly, openly, and with an enormous amount of empathy and sensitivity. And I was furious at Michael Caputo last week or the week before when Michael Caputo, who I've had run-ins with on Twitter. You know who Michael Caputo is. He's the guy who was in Trump's Health and Human Services area of this, or in the CDC, Health and Human Services, and he was doing all these really rotten things. And he said a lot of racist things as well. And he had ranted on Facebook a week or two ago and said, the people in the CDC or the FDA, they are seditious and they need to be blah, blah, blah. And then he had to take a leave of absence, citing mental issues. And so, as much as I despise Michael Caputo, and I do despise him, and I went on Twitter and said I have no sympathy for him, I've had to rethink that. I don't have sympathy for him still. I just hope the guy changes his ways. I'll leave it at that. And I hope the guy gets help. And I did tweet out a week or so back, get some help. Just like I hope Kanye West gets help. Because even though I don't like what he said and some of the things he's been doing and some of the both of these guys, they are human beings. As much as I loathe Michael Caputo and as much as I really do loathe what Kanye West has been getting up to these last few years, saying what he said about Harriet Tubman, saying what he said about enslavement being a choice for black people, that somehow black people may have chosen that was a choice. Oh, please. You can tell that I don't have any kind of care. Now, the only decent thing he said was that George Bush didn't care about black people. And certainly he didn't in terms of Katrina, but he actually, on the African continent, was very good with his HIV/AIDS initiative that was actually very helpful. And that's the one place where he actually did care about black people. But again, black people in America, maybe not, maybe. I don't know. Certainly with Katrina, he didn't. But that's probably the only thing that Kanye West has said that has made any sense in the last, 20 years? And then interrupting Taylor Swift like he did, and embarrassing Beyonce and embarrassing himself. And I know, he lost his mother. So look, all of these things are serious and real and sad. I put that phone number out there because, if you need to talk to somebody, especially now in these very difficult times of this virus and with this dictator in the White House and all the media noise and the social media noise as well, and the news media. And I think one of the best things to do, quite frankly, is turn some of this stuff off. Maybe even turn this podcast off. I mean, really, if you find what I'm saying to be really troubling you, then you know that there are a billion other podcasts out there that are much more lighthearted and sanguine. And by all means, obviously, you know that. I don't have to tell you. But I do thank you for listening if you are listening. And I do mean that with the deepest sincerity. All of this is to say that this book, They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer, Mayer, is still available if you would wish to read it. I may or may not read some of it or parts of it again. I don't know if I'll do it on Twitter, but I may do it on one of these podcast episodes. And I really remind you to vote early. Please vote early. Make sure you have a plan to vote. I am going to tell you right now that today, September 24th, 2020, Illinois, the state of Illinois began early voting today in person. And the state of Illinois began mailing out ballots, the vote by mail ballots, to all registered voters today. So please, Illinois, if you are listening, please vote early. If you are listening, vote early in person. There'll be far less lines. There'll be physical distancing. You'll be able to obviously have to wear a mask. So please, Illinois, if you are listening, Russia, if you're listening, no, Illinois, if you're listening, you can vote beginning today, and you can vote in person. That's a really good thing. This early voting thing is really important, as I've said. If you vote early, I'm telling you, you will see change here. So, for those of you in Illinois, the state of Illinois, the great state, vote early today, please. And by the way, I would be remiss also if I did not point this out. You can get newsletters from an excellent source. It's called Democracy Docket. Democracy, D-O-C-K-E-T, democracydocket.org. You can also sign up for their newsletter. It's a great source of information for all the litigation. If you're someone who's kind of wondering about the election and wow, are the Democrats prepared? What are they doing? How are they reacting? Then let me tell you that you can go to Democracy Docket. It is a great source of information. The person who runs it is Mark Elias. You can find him on Twitter at MARCELIAS, Democracy Docket. And you can sign up for their newsletter. It lets you know about where Democrats and where these lawyers, including Mark Elias himself and many others, are litigating and winning all these cases, all these threats to your voting rights and trying to block them. The Democrats and people like Mark Elias, who are doing excellent work out here, are litigating in states all over the country, and they're winning a vast majority of these crucial lawsuits. So please do get in touch with democracydocket.org. You can sign up for their newsletter. You can follow Mark Elias, MARCELIAS, on Twitter. Really good source of information. He's an attorney who's doing all this great work along with his team all over the country. So rest assured that the Democrats and people who are aligned with them are doing the right thing and are doing all the yeoman's work right now as you listen to me on countering all this Republican garbage that is going on around the country. And by the way, you can call Illinois. If you're an Illinois voter, call the Illinois Secretary of State, 217-782-4141 or 312-814-6440. and get more details about voting in person or any other questions you may have for the Illinois Secretary of State and that Secretary's team of people who will help you. A quick correction. The Twitter handle of Mark Elias of democracydocket.org is MARCEELIAS. That's MARCEELIAS. If you are feeling anxious, please do get involved to the extent that you can. Get in touch with the Indivisible organization. Get in touch with iwillvote.com. Phone bank. Educate people about voting. Learn about voting. Learn about the state's rules. I have a list of all 50 states, voting commissions, election commissions, or secretaries of state. And they are all about getting you to vote and be familiar with the voting rules. I have links. Make sure that you check your voter registration. I have links to every state in which that can be done. For every state. For those of you living in any state, obviously, you check the state that you're living in. And make sure you're registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote, make sure you do register to vote. I have links for all of that. So please go to Twitter and go to The Popcorn REEL. That's at The Popcorn REEL. And you will see a pinned tweet. That pinned tweet is the list of voting links to the Secretary of State's offices in every state and DC, all official, all factual, all real, authentic information. So please get involved. Thank you. I leave you with this from Fahrenheit 11/9. Michael Moore's documentary from 2018. And I say to you, tell everyone you know, check your voter registration, register to vote, and make sure you vote early.
Months from now, when we realize that the democracy we wish we'd had never came to be, and what we did have was eliminated due to some national emergency, will we ask ourselves, when was that moment we could have turned things around before it was too late? Was it when the teacher in your family had to get a second job? Was it when you first saw the friendly cop on your beat wearing this and driving around in that? Was it when, after months of being addicted to the pills you've been given to make the pain go away, that you realized it really wasn't the pain that needed to go away? Was it when you first heard that the president you dearly loved took more money from Goldman Sachs than any other contributor, and you wanted to tell someone, but instead, you just quietly threw up in your mouth? Was it when you convinced yourself that this misfortune would never come to your town? Was it when you realized that we do indeed love our guns more than we love our kids? And that if this is the America we're trying to save, maybe we need to ask ourselves, why? Why save this America? The America I want to save is the America we've never had. It didn't need to end up like this. And it still doesn't. By the time it coalesces into one giant terror, it is too late. We had spent too much time trying to comfort ourselves with the belief that the Constitution would save us. Elections would save us. The special prosecutor would save us. Impeachment would save us. We kept hoping, but it was that hope that killed us. Hope was wishful and passive and comforting. We didn't need comfort. We needed action. And sometimes I guess it takes a Donald Trump to make us wake up and realize that what we need to do is to acknowledge that we have to get rid of the whole rotten system that gave us Trump. And to realize that now, right now, our time is up.